Good morning. This is the March 16, 2023 meeting of the Planning Board. And the Chair, Commissioner Science and Commissioner Bedoin are absent, but we're fortunate to have Commissioner Bartley and Commissioner Hedrick in attendance. So we're going to start first by following the tradition set by the chair, which is to give a little bit of the history, some details about history here in the county. And I'll just tell you what it's about. More than 200 years ago, Jaru Mamut, I may have killed his last name, purchased the freedom of his son, Aquila, from enslavement by the Chambers family of Montgomery County. Jaru Mamut gained his own freedom shortly thereafter, after 44 years in slavery, and became a successful entrepreneur, property owner, and prominent early American Muslim. He was memorialized in a well-known portrait by Charles Wilson Peale. Amazing. Anyway, let's go on with the agenda. The first item in the agenda is preliminary matters, and it has to do with the adoption of resolutions. And we can either, if the other commissioners have questions, these are resolutions, these are items that were presented to the planning board on March 9th and were approved. So there's a couple of resolutions. We can take them individually if commissioners have questions. Other than that, I will entertain a motion to approve both the Corso Chevy Chase H148 Forest Conservation Plan, MCPB number 23-020, and the second one is 14511 Jones Lane 119607228-MCPB number 23-023. So I hear a motion.
I move that we adopt both the resolutions, the Corso Chevy Chase H148 Forest Conservation Plan and the resolution for 14511 Jones Lane. I don't have any questions myself. Sean?
I second the motion.
Great. So let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's 3 versus 0. So we approve those resolutions. Now we move on to the approval of the minutes. And I also ask for a motion to approve the minutes. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Sorry, there are no minutes, just to let you know.
Okay.
Oh, there are no minutes.
Okay, I was wondering why.
Okay, all right. Well, good. We'll move on to the, do we have a state legislative update? Oh, we don't?
No, not today.
Okay, good. All right. So we're moving on to the record plats. And we have the subdivision plat number 220221050, Oakmont R200 zone, 6 lots, 1 parcel located on the north side of Central Avenue, 150 feet east of Oakmont Street, Great Seneca Science Corridor Master Plan. Again, do I hear a motion for approval, or is there any discussion of this record plat?
I move that we approve.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bartley. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Okay, second by Commissioner Hedrick. So we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Again, it's approved. So we move to the item number 3. Now, do we need to, in any of these items, do we need to take a recess, or can we just move on?
You're good. Keep rolling.
Okay, let's keep on rolling. Okay, we have regulatory extension requests. The first is by the Diner or Dinner School, preliminary plan number 1202300040. And this is the first extension request. And they are requesting to extend the review period from March to July, the end of July. And it's a 4-month extension. And the idea is to convert an existing office to a school use, and it's in 9312 Old Georgetown Road. Any discussion, or do I hear a motion for approving this extension request?
I so move.
Okay, Commissioner Bartley and Commissioner Hedrick seconded. So all those in favor, again, say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
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 Okay, it's approved. Then we move on to the next extension. We have, actually, we have 3 extension requests. This one is 7126 Wisconsin Avenue Sketch Plan Amendment, Preliminary Plan, Site Plan, Extension Request number 2. And this is the second request to extend the review period from March to May. So it's actually a 2-month extension request, and has to do with resolving some of the site designs items and making the final submission. There's a sketch plan, a preliminary plan, and a site plan request to extend. So given those issues, do I hear a motion, or any of the commissioners have any questions? Or
I do have a question. What's
okay,
the property address on this one, and what's the name of it?
this is 70. You're asking, okay, this is 7126 Wisconsin Avenue.
Just making sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a 7126 Wisconsin Avenue. The sketch plan, preliminary plan, and site plan. Any other question or
It's
comment?
just an extension for 2 months.
I move.
For 2 months.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, I move that this extension be approved.
Seconded.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. So we move on to the next item, the next extension, which is Aurora Estates preliminary plan number 1202300050, regulatory review extension request. And this is a request to extend by 4 months until August 13. And again, it's request number 1. And it's an application to create a 4-lot subdivision for 4 single-family detached units. So if anybody of the commissioners have questions, or we can, I will entertain a motion. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I do have a question. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can we hear from one of our staff members why it's 4 months instead of 2, similar to the other parties? Thanks.
I think in the case of the Aurora Estates, I mean, we can ask the staff, if the staff is available, if they want to answer that question. Why 4 months instead of 2 months? Is there anybody from the staff that can address that issue?
Hi, good morning. I'm Sandra Pereira, Regulatory Supervisor with App County team. And yes, we're asking for 4 months to give us a little bit of extra buffer time to deal with septic testing and some of the comments that the applicant received on this application. Some of it involved with moving the houses forward towards the road, which meant that some of the initially proposed septic fields would have to be adjusted and moved to other locations, and that just takes time in coordination with the other agencies.
Okay.
Is this an extension that was requested by the applicant?
Yes.
Or is this something that the staff thought it was necessary? Both. No?
It was both. The applicant has requested and staff supports the extension. And of course, if everything is resolved ahead of time, we would bring this item to the board before the time expires.
All right. Any more questions from the commissioners?
None from me.
I move to approve the extension.
Seconded.
Okay. All right. So we
Thank you,
have a
Sandra.
first and a second, and let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. All right. Now we move on to the, we have a Parks Director report from Mr. Riley, I guess. Are you there, Mr. Riley?
Hi, Mike Riley. How are you?
Yes, I am. Good
Okay.
morning. Good
Good morning.
morning, Commissioners. I am Mike Riley, the Director of the Parks Department, here to give you my Parks Director's report. Acting Planning Director Tanya Stern and I alternate weeks, giving our respective reports about items of interest and note going on in our respective worlds. So this week is my turn. And I want to start out with an official welcome to Commissioners Bartley and Hedrick to the Park and Planning Commission family on behalf of myself and the Parks Department. Since this is my first formal item in front of you, it's great to have you both on board. I did watch the interviews and got to meet you a little bit last week, so I look forward to getting to know you and a little bit better as time goes on. But welcome. I'm going to endeavor to get a few slides up, and I give it a try and see if I can do that. And as my slides coming up, I just wanted to kind of start with just a general statement about our park system here in Montgomery County. It is a big park system. I did a little benchmarking this morning just to kind of give some ideas of comparisons. The infamous New York City Parks and Recreation Department manages about 30,000 acres of parkland in the 5 boroughs of New York City. Dallas, I went to the National Park and Recreation Conference a few years ago and heard the director of Dallas, Texas Park and Recreation speak. And what struck me is that their system is a great benchmark to ours in terms of size and comparison. It's about 21,000 acres and they manage 410 parks. We're 37,000 acres and manage 420 parks. So those are both big cities, but on a county note, our closest sister, of course, is Fairfax County, Virginia. They manage 23,000 acres of parks, and in the great competition between Fairfax and Montgomery County, I'm pleased to say we have them dwarfed at 37,000 acres of parkland. So the reason I just kind of start with this is as I come to you with my director's reports, I try to cover a wide array of topics because it is such a big system with a lot of different programs and facilities and interests. You know, just some examples of things I could talk to you about ad nauseum is our extensive trail system at over 200 miles, our nearly 300 athletic fields that we provide, our 40 public-private partnerships that we manage, where we have third-party entities leasing our land and running programs in partnership with us. Specialty niche areas like we're the lead in the county's white-tailed deer management program, which is of great interest to a lot of people, in control of non-native invasive plants in the park system, which is a big uphill battle. We have a park police division of nearly 100 sworn police officers. So that's not something people typically think about when you use the term park and recreation. They don't necessarily think about law enforcement, but that's just, I could go on, but I think you get the point I'm just trying to make is that we are a large, diverse system that covers a lot of different topics. And what I do in my park director's report each week, of course, if there is something urgent or of note that the board needs to know, I will cover that. But also I try to kind of move around and cover a wide variety of different topics to kind of let you know what's going on. So my opening slide here is the summer concert series at Brookside Garden. It is one of many, many types of events we've been trying to expand over the last 5+ years. We were not hyper focused on programming a decade ago. We were more focused on delivering great parks and facilities that people enjoyed and that brought people in naturally. But now we're having a lot more programmed events like this one. And what we're finding, particularly since the pandemic, is there is an outrageous pent-up demand for outdoor activities in particular that bring community members together of common interests to a public space. And the attendance we're having at these events is pretty unbelievable, all the way up from the Germantown Glory fireworks out at South Germantown Park that can attract more than 30,000 people, down to our smaller events like Acoustics and Ales, where we simply bring out a band, local craft beer vendor, and some food trucks, and we may get anywhere between 500 and 1,000 people showing up at a location for an event like that. So I don't want to be too dramatic about this program, but I think one of the roles of parks that is huge is bringing our community members together to get to know each other and interact over common interest, and it's something that you'll hear a lot about going forward.
Okay, are you done with your report?
No, I just a few more slides.
Okay,
let's
go ahead.
Wait, oh, I see. That arrow won't work. I need to go here. There we go. So I'm not going to give a quiz afterwards, and I don't want you to look at this too hard, but this is the organizational chart of the Parks Department. The only point I want to make about this is I have 2 deputies, Mitty Figueretto, who oversees 5 administrative divisions, and then Gary Burnett, the Deputy Director of Operations, who oversees 5 operational divisions. So anytime a planning board member has a question and interest, feel free to come to any one of the 3 of us. Of course, please always start with me, but if for any reason you don't get hold of me in a timely manner, please please go out to Mitty or Gary, and we'll try to be as responsive as we can. And I hope to host a parks tour sometime this summer, where we actually get you to meet all of our senior management team and give you a tour of some parks of interest.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
We did, and I also want to let you know, if you don't have a copy, we need to get it in your hands. We did recently have the planning board approve our long-range plan for the parks, called the Park Recreation and Open Space Plan. It has a lot of themes and goals, but you see those 3 bullets on the left are kind of at the highest level of what we're trying to achieve. And we had extensive community outreach in the development of this plan, and I think it is an excellent roadmap for the park system of the future. We publish and update a report for both internal and external consumption every few months, called the Green Tree Report. It simply is data on the breadth of the park system. This is just some highlights of some of the numbers and the data that is in it. We always put it in our operating budget request to emphasize that it is a pretty vast system. So it's something that if you ever want to talk to somebody about the system, it's a great one-pager to have in your hands, just to say, hey, if you want to know about the park system, here's the acreage, number of parks, types of facilities. And it's a good, I reference it multiple times a year, particularly when I'm going out to community events to speak. I always have a copy in my hands. We've been very aggressive over the last several years in seeking
on there. I thought.
Oh, do you have a question, also? Commissioner Bartley?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Don't you manage swimming pools also? Don't you manage swimming pools also? I didn't see that on the slide.
It is in Montgomery County. We are a little bit unique in that the Recreation Department is a branch of the executive branch of county government. So the Recreation Department under County Executive Elrich manages aquatic centers and the larger community recreation centers in the county.
Okay.
Many though of those aquatic centers and community recreation centers are in our parks, to make it a little bit more confusing. like the
Yes.
Germantown
So
report.
the buildings and those themselves are run by the executive, but they're within a park system that's part of Parks and Planning. Is that
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It's not, it's a
The
portion
facilities.
of them. The facility, it's not all of them. Some of the pools and rec centers are on county-owned property, but a good
Mhm.
number of them, I think it's almost half, if not more, are on our parkland.
Okay, all right, that's interesting.
Yep. So we've had great success over the last few years getting support from the Maryland General Assembly and our congressional representatives for state and federal grants. You can see just last year, this is fiscal year 22, we got $15 million for a wide variety of projects. And this is really important because the Montgomery County's bonding for their general obligation bonds is a big number. It's about 360 million that they can dole around for schools or roads or libraries or parks. But we're just a competitor for that bucket, and there's not enough to go around. So in order to support our park system, it's very important that we also pursue state and federal funding, and we've had great success over the last few years. And we hope to have good news for you once the General Assembly concludes in April about additional funding this year. I talked to you on the first slide about our parks programs. We call it park activation. These are just some graphics of the different types of events. You can see we have a small team of very creative people that is constantly trying to answer the question, what is of interest to people? These are just some of the examples. I'll just highlight a couple that I'm familiar with. We did a one-off outdoor movie about the Rocky Horror Picture Show. We had over 500 people show up. And we did something called the Ale Trail, which is a hike around Lake Needwood with water views. And water views are pretty rare in Montgomery County. So we just simply brought out a band, food trucks, and local craft beer vendors seemed to be the magic. And we had 1,500 people show up for that walk. And I just have a few more slides. Park refreshers is a term you'll hear from us. This is where we use our capital program to go into our older community parks and work with the community to talk about what is in need of refurbishment and what type of new amenities would you like to see in your parks. These are two photos of one that we completed. The photo on the left is a tiny little park in Kengar near Kensington called Kengar Edith Throckmorton local park that we went in and redeveloped. And then the picture to the top right is something that's in design at a park in the Wheaton area called Carroll Knowles, where the community has embraced the primary feature in that park being a bike skills track and pump track, which is a kind of a trending amenity that we really haven't had in our parks. Big focus for more than 20 years on improving the athletic field, the quality and quantity of athletic fields in the parks and at the schools. We manage the athletic fields not only in our park system, almost 300 of them, but over 200 more at MCPS elementary and middle schools. We've had a program where we go in and refurbish them through the capital program, and then we take them into our maintenance program through the operating budget. And as you can see from these before and after pictures, we really do make quite a difference. We just had a sustainability plan approved by the commission. It was a bi-county effort with our partners in Prince George's departments and Montgomery departments. We have a lot of very successful initiatives in the area of sustainability. One I'm very excited about is that we're going to be adding a lot of solar generation, primarily rooftop solar on some of our larger maintenance depots this year. And we are well on our way of transitioning our gas-powered lawn maintenance equipment to electric equipment. And there's a lot of discussion on that, both at the local and state level on various legislation, and we think we're leading the way there and can be very helpful in how that's done. And lastly, I'm just concluding with something that happened last night. There is a very exciting project we're involved with in downtown Bethesda called Bethesda Market. It is, if you're familiar with where Elm Street Park is or where the Farm Women's Market is, it is that location. It's a project in partnership, and that's a lowercase p partnership with a private developers advancing a mixed-use development with over 400 residential units. And as part of that project, they will turn 2 surface parking lots owned by the county into more than 3 acres of parkland that we will own and manage. They're also going to refurbish the historic Farm Women's Market, which is of great interest to a lot of people, and then also replace those parking spaces that are lost with a public underground parking garage. We had a community meeting last night at the Lawton Center in Chevy Chase. We're having another one tonight at Bethesda Elementary School. And we had 115 people show up last night, very robust engagement. And it was really the kind of community meeting we want, where we shared some ideas about what these parks could be. And then community members got to tell us what they think, both verbally and through Post-it notes. There'll be an online survey. And it was just a lot of very good input with people telling us what they would like to see in the park and their community. And with that, I am done with my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Commissioner Bartley, I think the commissioners have some questions. I hear them raising their hands, so go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation, Mike Riley. I look forward to getting to know you more personally. I'm an avid outdoorsman, and so are my children. And the parks have been essential to my children's social emotional health. And I know it's essential to other families' social and emotional health. And I really appreciate your efforts in maintaining the park. Super exciting to hear that you refurbish, maintain parks so that they're usable, so that we can get out and play, especially our children. And it's super exciting to hear that the Bethesda's Women Farm Market community meeting resulted in parking lots being utilized for parks. I'm also a big archery guy, so I know I met with you briefly, and I said more archery right now. Montgomery County has 2 places to shoot archery, and I think that the archery facility should be expanded for that opportunity. And also, I'm super excited to learn more about your whitetail management program. But thanks for sharing this presentation. You know, during my introduction last week, one of the things I pointed out is the beauty of our parks here in Montgomery County. Being a Southern California kid growing up on the military base, we didn't have the availability of parks like we do here in Montgomery County, and it's a tremendous asset. And as the population in the county increases and becomes more dense, it's going to be important to maintain our parks so that our families and children can be connected more to the world through our green spaces. So thanks so much for the presentation. I look forward to being a supporter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bartley.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hendrick, do you want to say something?
Yeah, yes, I do. Just a couple of quick questions. One, could we get a copy of those slides? I didn't see it in the packets or anything, in the links or anything. Was it? If it wasn't in, if I missed it, I'm sorry, but I wanted to get a copy if I could. That'd be fantastic. Thank you. I read part of the PROS on the flight yesterday, actually, so it was very good. I was interested, particularly in the social engagement piece, and I know that I'm really interested in the programming and expanding that and helping with sort of the activation of the parks. I've seen some of the pin-up demand, and I think, you know, Sean's mentioned his kids like to go outdoors. I've seen it in my own kids going outside. I like to run them around on the weekends, and hopefully they collapse at the end of the day. So do I, but it's sort of mutually assured destruction. On the couple of things, I wanted to talk, just ask a little bit. On the second slide, you had the foundation off to the side and has its own executive director and the organizational chart. Could you give me a little bit of more information on how sort of the Parks Foundation works with the Parks Department? I'm curious sort of how that arrangement works.
Absolutely. The Parks Foundation is a wonderful supporter. Their executive director, Katie Richter's office actually is right outside mine in the Wheaton headquarters building.
Okay.
So anytime on a Thursday where we can find a moment, I'd love to introduce what I'll do is I'll bring Katie down in my next park director's report and introduce her to the board in 2
That'd be
weeks.
that'd be
And,
fantastic.
but the short story, and of course they have their own board. They have a great board of volunteer board who oversees the Parks Foundation, but they're a fundraising arm. They raise money to support the parks through a variety of mechanisms, and we've had donations come in at Brookside Gardens, for example, in excess of $1 million. From donors all the way down to the bike. One of the programs I would have loved to have highlighted this morning is last summer we did what we called a trail ambassador program. We recruited a bunch of high school kids for 2 weeks to come out and do trail maintenance, and we also taught them how to ride a mountain bike. And at the end of the program at graduation, they each got the mountain bike, and that was made possible through $10,000 from the foundation to buy those bikes.
That's fantastic.
So that's the short story: is they raise money to support the parks.
Mostly as a fundraising organization.
Yes.
So I was wondering how similar it was to Rockville's, which I'm familiar with where I live. But yeah, if we could maybe set up a meeting or have them come down next time, I would be interested in that and seeing how we can do that. I have a couple of other questions. I don't want to get too much into it. I assume we'll get some sort of summary of the Bethesda Women's Farmers Market, the meetings and everything at some point in the future.
Yes,
when we
absolutely.
get to that point. I figured I would come up. I want to.
Yeah, I think the step was once we hear from the community and our consultants come up with the next iteration of a concept, we'll show that to the board.
All right, fantastic. And I had one more question, and is when you did the Rocky Horror Picture Show, did people yell at the screen and throw things?
I have to admit I was not in attendance, but I am told the answer was yes.
I assume that if we have an activation of parks with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, there's no way to get around that. I guess probably easier to clean up outside.
I know when we marketed it, we advertised we would supply all the props upon entry.
All right. If we do that again, I'll have to come out next time. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really do. And thanks for the report. I appreciate it. Maybe we get together and meet up sometime. I'd like to get to know a little bit more about the park system. I also, when we can do that tour of the parks, I really would like to do that because I'm familiar with some of the larger ones and the ones that I go to regularly. But I know that they're 37,000. I'm sure there's ones I haven't gotten to yet. So I really would like to see them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bartley. Go ahead.
I have a follow-up question. Mr. Riley, do you all participate in the Hometown Heritage Days? There's something where there's these historical sites within the county. And I think there's like an old schoolhouse out in the Poolsville area. Is that within the park system, or are those in a different part of the? There's a one-room schoolhouse in Poolsville, and I didn't know if that was part of the
I think you're talking about Kingsley Schoolhouse. That is ours. We do manage 114 historic sites in the park system.
I think you should add that to your presentation because it was really beneficial for our family. We visited the one-room schoolhouse in Poolsville, and a gentleman by the name of Mr. Kiplinger gave an outstanding presentation with regards to that one-room schoolhouse and the connection it had to the communities. And he also referenced the Quakers' roles and the African Americans' roles with regards to Montgomery County and whatnot. And so I think the historical perspective and the preservation that the parks do is really important to the history and importance of Montgomery County.
Well, you've given me at least 2 themes for future park directors report, the Park Foundation and historic and cultural resources. So my staff loves being invited to come talk about their area of specialty. So we'll do that at a future park directors report.
Yeah, I'll second Sean on that. I knew there was a few. I didn't realize there's 114 historic sites. That's amazing. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. You always do a great job, you and your staff. I've always been very impressed by the amount of not only what the staff does, but also the volunteers and the foundation, and just there's so much interest in the parks. So much pent up demand, especially after the pandemic, that there's so much to do, and I'm glad that we're doing that Bethesda Women's Farm Market community, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about that in the future. Usually, this is just the beginning of the process, getting together with the community, finding out what they want, and but it sounds really exciting. So anyway, it's a huge program, and we look forward for a tour. If you can take us around. I mean, I use Brookside Gardens all the time. I use some of the trails like the Matthew Henson, go there. I walk every morning with my dog on that trail. And it's just wonderful to be able to be outside and, like Commissioner Hedrick said, to get your kids tired so they can, they can, yes. And we tired too. So anyway, thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate your report.
And excited about being tired. The key is being happy about being tired.
Yes. Okay. All right. We don't have to take a vote or anything. This is just an item for a discussion. Now, do we take a recess now to go into item 5, or do we continue?
You need to, yes, take a recess.
We take a recess. Okay.
Well, not
So we'll take
recess officially, just wait till the next team's call.
Okay.
Go to the next team's call.
We're gonna go to the next team's meeting, and we'll continue with our meeting. Thank you very much.
Is it
Okay, good morning. This is the March 16th Planning Board meeting. We're continuing our meeting, and it's about 10:15 now. We have one item item number 5 that we're going to be discussing. It's a public hearing. It's called the Larson Property Administrative Subdivision Plan number 6202303030. And it's a request to convert a parcel into 3 lots for 3 single-family detached dwelling units located at 10420 Oakland Drive in Potomac. It's a 7.18 acres. It's zone RE2, and it's part of the 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan. It's 2 flag lots and 1 without frontage. It's actually behind. It doesn't face directly on Oakland Drive. And there was a need by the staff to look at adequate separation, 80-foot minimum separation between the houses. And it's recommended by Montgomery County Department of Transportation and the Department of Permitting Services, and the fire department looked at it too. And there's a need for a final record plat that needs to be submitted. At this point in time, I'm going to ask whether there's anybody that would like to address. Is there anybody testifying for this particular application?
There are no speakers.
There are no speakers. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to open it up. I think, if I could have some of the staff basically answer some of the questions that the commissioners may have. I'll start by saying one of the concerns was whether emergency vehicles could make it all the way back to where there's one existing house, but there's 2 houses that are going to be built. So is there enough access for the emergency vehicles to go through?
Excuse me, Commissioner Pinheiro, staff did have a presentation prepared. I just want to make sure.
Go ahead,
did you intend to just jump right in, or did you want us to give a presentation
first? Why don't you go ahead, but just take into consideration my question. That's it. Go ahead.
Sure.
With the presentation.
Will do. Just muted myself. I'm going to turn it over to our lead staff person on this case, Alexandra Dupre.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra Dupre. I'm a regulatory planner with the Up County Division. And I'm going to talk through the Larson property application with you all. It's an administrative subdivision plan, number 620230030. So a little overview, it's an administrative subdivision plan to convert a 7.18 acre parcel into 3 lots for 3 single-family detached dwelling units. The applicant is proposing 2 flag lots and 1 lot without frontage for a total of 3 lots. Staff recommends approval of this administrative subdivision plan with conditions. So we wanted to outline a bit for the new board members what an administrative subdivision plan is. I don't believe that you've encountered one yet since beginning. So an administrative subdivision plan is a preliminary plan submitted usually for director's approval before the preparation of a plat. It may only be used to create lots. And this application specifically requires approval from you all, the planning board, because it is proposing flag lots and a lot without frontage. So as mentioned before, it's located in Potomac. It is 7.18 acres. It is in the residential estate zone, RE2. It falls under the 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan. It has a Montessori school to the north, abutting the property, and a religious temple to the south. It is 0.5 miles south of Falls Road. So it is an existing flag lot with an atypical existing access easement where you can see the dashed line on the image. It's currently improved with a single family home, a gravel drive, a basketball court, and a barn. It has a stream and associated wetlands, a 100-year floodplain, and a stream buffer, which are all located on the southern portion of the property. So the proposal for this plan are 3 buildable lots intended for the use of 3 single-family detached dwelling units. They're intending to remove the basketball court in the barn, and they plan on keeping the existing home, which would be located on Lot 3. They're proposing forest plantings and a Category 1 easement in the southern portion of the property, and they will be on public water and sewer. So lots 1 and 2, where you can see the highlighting around the image, those are the proposed flag lots. They're intended for 2 single-family homes, 1 on each lot, and they will share a driveway, which you can see leading to Oakland Drive. Lot 3, which is highlighted here, is the lot that does not abut a road. It's a lot without frontage. And it will maintain the existing single-family home that's located on the lot. And it will continue to use this existing access easement to reach Oakland Drive. So we have received some community correspondence on this application. We received 1 letter and an email from the community. The letter was from the owner of the Montgomery school to the north, and they were concerned with buffering the shared driveway of the proposed lots from their property with a board-on-board fence. There's actually an existing split rail fence at this location, which I will show you here. So you can see to the left, this is where the proposed driveway would be for lots 1 and 2, the flag lots. And on the right here is the Montessori school. So they currently have this fence in between the lots, but the Montessori school owner wanted to see a board-on-board fence. So a fence is outside of this review. Fence requirements are not part of the subdivision regulations. And so staff has raised this issue to the applicant to find an acceptable solution for both parties, but it is outside of this review. And so in addition to that letter, we received an email from the community with questions regarding zoning and also asking if there would be a roadway built. So we responded that there is no zoning change proposed and that there are no proposed roadways. For our analysis and findings, per the subdivision ordinance, the planning board must review flag lots and lots without frontage to ensure adequate separation between the building envelopes of the proposed lots and the adjacent lots. This plan meets all applicable sections of the subdivision regulations, including requirements for flag lots and lots that do not abut a road. So first, the findings for lots 1 and 2, the flag lots. The subject property is an existing flag lot, and so the position and shape of the tract does not really allow for other ways to subdivide this without creating flag lots. So the 2 flag lots that are proposed would use a shared driveway as mentioned, and the proposed building restriction lines would maintain building envelopes at least 80 feet from the building envelopes of adjacent lots. Now for the findings for lot 3. This is the only lot that is proposed without frontage. Lot 3 will be served by the existing access easement. And so as required, the proposed building restriction lines would maintain building envelopes of at least 80 feet from the building envelopes of adjacent lots, as well as the lots between the existing house and Oakland Drive. The administrative subdivision plan that's proposed would conform to the 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan. The Potomac planning area south of the Village of Potomac is recommended for low-density residential development like this that conforms to the RE2 zone. This proposed subdivision is consistent with the general master plan recommendations. So for frontage improvements, Oakland Drive is designated as a neighborhood good enough. neighborhood connector under the 2021 Complete Streets Design Guide, roadway classifications, with approximately 80 feet of right-of-way. This applicant is providing a 6-foot sidewalk along the property's frontage, which is consistent with the Complete Streets Design Guide. There are no additional frontage improvements required. A bit about the forest conservation plan. There's no existing forest on the property. However, they are proposing 1.65 acres of forest plantings within the stream buffer and adjacent to the buffer, which you can see in the southern portion of this property. And so the green indicates the forest plantings in the Category 1 conservation easements, and then the yellow stripes are the wetland areas. This proposed Category 1 conservation easement would protect the stream, wetlands, floodplain, stream buffer, and the proposed planted forest. So 2 trees are proposed for removal, and then 6 will be impacted by this development. And so to mitigate for this loss, the applicant will plant 6 new trees on the site, and staff supports this proposed tree variance. The application generates fewer than 50 new person trips in the morning and evening peak hours. Therefore, roads and transportation facilities are adequate to support this application. Public school facilities will be adequate to support and service the application. They will be served by public water and sewer, and stormwater management requirements will be met and approved prior to record plat. So in summary, this application complies with all the provisions of the subdivision regulations. They meet the requirements of the RE2 zone, and staff supports exemption from the RE2 frontage requirements for Lot 3, the lot without frontage. They conform to the 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan. Public facilities are adequate. The lot is appropriate with respect to size, shape, width, and orientation for the proposed use. They comply with the Chapter 22A Forest Conservation, and they meet all findings and requirements for an administrative subdivision plan. So in summary, we recommend approval of this administrative subdivision plan, number 620230030 with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. So I find this is not so uncommon, no? In Potomac, I have seen some houses like flag lots that are built behind other houses. So in your opinion, this is not that uncommon, no? In Potomac, where you have, what is it, 2-acre lots?
I don't believe that this is that uncommon.
Yeah.
As a department, we don't love seeing flag lots, but since this is already an existing flag lot, we believe that the applicant's doing what they can with the existing conditions of the property.
Yeah, okay. And a question about the Montessori school issue about the fence. So we cannot require that from the applicant to, or at least to have a conversation with the school, because the school is concerned about the protecting, the children from any kind of construction or for the road. So you're saying that we don't get involved in that, or is that something that DPS could get involved, require that there'll be some kind of a fence, improvement to the fence, because that fence doesn't seem to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. My understanding is that within the scope of this application, we're not able to look at something as detailed as a fence. We did bring it up to the applicant, but we don't necessarily have the backing to ask for that. But I am curious also about the rest of your question regarding later in the line. And so I would defer to my supervisors, Patrick or Sandra, who are online.
Hi, good morning. Sandra Pereira, Regulatory Supervisor. So this issue has been brought up to the applicant, and we shared the letter that we received from the neighbor. I see Michael Norton here from the applicant's team, and he has raised his hand to speak on this question. So they might have additional details that they want to share with us. But from our perspective, we have encouraged the applicant to work with their neighbor. As good neighbors, they should be able to work this out. And I don't know if you want to have the applicant speak now or maybe later on this.
Yeah, I would be I would be glad if the applicant can address this question.
I have a concern about the fence also in the Montessori school. You may have received a letter from the person who is responsible for the management and control of the Montessori school, but I would be curious as to whether or not the children's parents who are responsible for their children's safety, health, are aware of this impending project, and whether or not the parents of those children would be concerned with the fact that a fence is not required, but there's going to be ongoing construction. In addition to the construction, it looks like the proposed driveway for lots 1 and 2 is going to be installed there. And I think the slide said 50 new person trips per week are going, per day, are going to go through there. So, the characteristics of the adjacent school are going to be affected by the installation of this driveway and proposed two lots. The question I have is, with the homes that are going there, are they going to be single family homes, or are they going to be high density structures, condos, townhomes, or are they going to be individual single family homes?
Sure. Thank you for that question. Before Mr. Norton answers, I want to address a couple of them. So there's 2 single family homes that are proposed. And so as part of our findings, we have to look at different development applications and understand how many vehicular trips they will produce. And so there's a cap at 50 trips before we have to go into further review. And so this application is proposing far less than 50 trips. And so what we're saying is that they won't require further review because they haven't reached that cap. Since this is just 2 single family homes, the number of cars moving out of this is going to be very minor. And I also believe that, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, but during that actual construction process, I understand there will be screening that would, I hope, help with some of that safety concern. But please, Mr. Norton, if you want to take it.
Well, before he takes it, let me, because Commissioner Commissioner Hedrick has raised his hand. I don't know whether it's a similar issue or he has a different issue. Go ahead, Commissioner Hedrick.
Yeah, I just wanted to be. So I was rereading through the staff report, the conditions, and listening to the presentation. The conditions, so it's approval with conditions. The conditions are the sidewalk and the forest planting, I assume. Is there other conditions that I was missing, or is those the primary conditions for approval? Recommended conditions for approval.
Sure. Thanks for your question. We have a list of essentially kind of go-to conditions for different applications. And so we have conditions that extend beyond just transportation and plantings that are pretty normal and applicable to a development application like this.
Okay.
And so you'll see in the report, the first major section of the report is all conditions.
So those 1 through 25 right there, those are the individual conditions, but nothing not to say non-boilerplate, but those are the conditions we're putting in and accepting. I'm just making sure that I got that all right.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
That's exactly.
And most of
right.
those are okay. And most of those are normally required through the subdivision plan. Something that's all I really had. I assume the driveway, I think you said, is going to be gravel through there, so there's not going to be massive paving or anything like that.
Somebody
gas
else
filter.
has raised their hand, and I'm not really sure who that is, but I know that Commissioner Bartley also is asking to speak.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Sean.
One of the things I'm impressed with is that there's going to be installed new forest and a buffer between but I'd like to get back to the Montessori school. Have the parents of Montessori school been engaged? Are they aware of this? And have they signed off on it? And so usually what they do is they go to their administrator, and then the administrator pipes in for them. And has there been meetings with the Montessori school and concerned parents? And the second, the proposed driveway, I think there's an existing easement that's gravel, correct? And then this proposed driveway will be a asphalt or concrete. It's not going to be gravel, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And
Okay,
so I think there was a misunderstanding where the gravel was. I think the gravel is an existing easement between some houses now.
That's the one to lot 3, I assume.
Lot 3, yes.
That's the lot 3 gravel, and then the new one will be an asphalt paved. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, can we have the staff address this issue about the fence, and then if the applicant also wants to address that?
I just wanted to add something real quick about the fence, if I may. So just like Alexandra said, as staff under the subdivision regulations, it's not under our purview to review fences. However, the planning board has the authority to require fences and/or screening as part of their approval. So feel free to keep that in the back of your mind as you hear the applicant and as you hear more about this topic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can we hear the applicant, what they're intending to do in terms of the fence?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Norton, Norton Land Design. Represent the applicant, Mr. Kim Larson, who is also on the call. I think if I'm welcome new board, by the way. I think typically after the staff does a presentation, we typically step in as well prior to questions, so we can kind of clear some things up ahead of time. We looked at this fence, and I have a couple of concerns about this. One is that we are proposing a 3-lot subdivision in an RE2 zone, a residential setting in a residential zone. The neighbor that's requesting the information is actually a private school in a residential setting under a conditional use. We do conditional uses as well. Typically, I would think that the school would install a privacy fence, that the school would actually have the correct screening along their property as required by a conditional use. So that's kind of where we've been thinking on this. If the fence is a concern for the school, it should actually be installed now by the school. I don't think that this should be a requirement of a residential homeowner to install a fence to protect a conditional use property. That's kind of my position on this and where I've been thinking on it. If the planning board disagrees with that, then we can certainly talk about, doing a fence. That's not a problem, but I just think that this is a little overreaching for a 3-lot subdivision from a neighbor is where I'm coming from on this. As far as the driveway, actually, it's 2 lots that are headed to the back. It's not any different than actually what's across the street and what's down the street. There's several flag lots. I was looking when everyone was asking the questions on this. The driveway will be 12 feet wide, so it's very characteristic of a residential community. Again, 2 lots going back. This is going to be minimal impact on the surrounding community. Houses are set back. This is actually 2 parcels that we're looking at right now. The actual portion of the flag lot is a separate parcel from the rear overall property. That portion of flag lot was purchased in the 80s prior to this owner. So this property has always been actually a lot without frontage until that portion of property was purchased, with the idea of doing a subdivision in the future as well. So I do want to kind of clarify some of those things, but I'm happy to have the discussion and answer any more questions on the fence. But that's where I was thinking on this.
I have a question. Have you had any conversations with the school about, I mean, I know how you feel, and we're
sure.
not gonna I don't think I mean, what I've heard is not something that we can require, I think, of you, but have you entertained any discussion about what kind of fence and the cost of the fence, and whether the school should do it, whether you should do it? Because I also see that there's quite a bit of separation between the proposed driveway and the actual fence that the school has right now, which, the white fence. So I don't know where that fence would go, but have you thought about just having this discussion with the school and see if you can reach some kind of an agreement?
Sure. I mean, I don't think the neighbors have any, I don't think the owners have any problem with that. My guess is that anyone that would be moving in or purchasing the house would likely install this fence anyway, because again, this is a playground in the rear of the property. My assumption is that they're going to install that. The Montessori school has not reached out to us. But the owner actually just told me he's more than happy to talk with them about it.
Yeah, can I suggest that we, given the applicant's going to have to follow any, safety protocols from DPS during construction, before just construction. For perhaps a pre-con meeting, we indicate we can relay, send an email, contact DPS, relay the concerns from the planning board based on the Montessori school, and suggest that a pre-con meeting occur on site so that DPS, Montessori school, the applicant are all aware of what the concerns are, and they can take appropriate measures to ensure safe construction and preventing any kids to entering the site while construction may be occurring.
Yeah, I was actually going to run on, and I think Patrick was more detailed than I would have been with that. But the concern from the Montessori school seems to be during construction primarily, and not as a long-term issue. And so when we get to that point, I think we can review the safety measures for the construction portion, which will be relatively short compared to the length of time. But I tend to agree with Patrick on that we're going to get a bite at that apple again later in the time. And if they're going to arrange a meeting prior to the construction portion of it, I think that should suffice.
Mr. Norton, thanks for being open for discussion, and thanks for giving your viewpoint with regards to the Montessori school. You pointed out that the Montessori school is a conditional use, and that's how they're operating under conditional use. And then you said it's their responsibility to build the fence. Are you suggesting that because you're taking an action, now the Montessori school has an additional responsibility because of the proactive development?
I'm saying that the Montessori school is under a conditional use, a special exception, and as part of that, there are requirements that they have to comply with from a conditional use, from a special exception. I don't think that the Montessori school should be able to say, hey, a 2-lot subdivision has to install a fence to protect them, when I think it should be incumbent on the property owner of the Montessori school, again, who's operating in a residential zone, to have the safety of their students. I don't understand.
So are you saying that? So I'm just I'm addressing your standpoint. You're saying that because you're building now, and because they're concerned for the safety of their students, that they are now required to do something proactively because you're going to build, correct? That's your position?
No, we're not changing the use of this property. It's a residential it's a residential property. What I'm saying is that as part of a conditional use, you have specific requirements that you have to comply with. And I did not review this, but in most cases, it is screening requirements and other things, whether that's a fence or what have you, that is required as part of a conditional use for approval to operate in zones. That is not required when you're doing a residential subdivision in a residential zone. So we're asking someone that has a special, a unique, special exception, and they're asking that a property owner who can do a subdivision to do something above and beyond what would be required for a subdivision. I'm struggling with that a little bit, to be honest with you.
Commissioner Bartley, may I jump in here real quick? Robert Cronenberg, Deputy Director. A couple things I wanted to just point out. The first one, I think Patrick and Alex and Sandra talked about the fence that would be during construction. And I think that that's more of a safety issue that can be addressed during a pre-construction meeting, as Patrick mentioned. The discussion about a fence and, with an application like this, I just want to say the board has the authority to request and require a fence as part of this application if you'd like to. Staff, when they reviewed it based on a two-lot, really a new two-lot subdivision, with the lots being fairly large at 2 acres, did not feel it was needed or required, with this application. But to staff's point as well, this is a new application. They're a developer, so we look at it from an impact standpoint on adjacent properties. So if this board feels it's appropriate to put a fence in, I'll have to go against a little bit what Mr. Norton said, because I do believe it's not the Montessori school requirement to put a fence up. If they'd like to, they can, but they'd probably have to go back and get their special exception amended, because that's usually part of the detail of that plan. An administrative subdivision is not as detailed as the site plans that we see, which is one of the reasons why I think a fence was not required as part of our conditions of approval. And there's an existing fence along the edge as well. But I did want to just point out that this board has the authority to do that. From a screening standpoint, from a buffer standpoint, you do. But we did not feel as staff that it was appropriate. But I think for future reference for subdivisions like this, just pointing out something that, we do evaluate it as part of a review, but just didn't feel it was appropriate for this one.
Yeah, and I would also say, Patrick Butler, for the record, that again, we find that the residential units are going to be a compatible use with the adjoining Montessori school. I think the awkwardness in the ask is that we're asking the residential units to put up a fence for the use that's on the adjoining property. I think is another layer to the ask, and why we didn't feel it was reasonable to ask this applicant to install the fence. However, if you disagree, like Robert and others have said, it's within your authority to require a fence or any screening that you feel is appropriate.
I particularly like what Patrick has recommended, having a pre-con meeting with DPS where they figure out, safety issues for the school and determine whether a fence is the way to go, and how that whether the share of whether the cost of the fence could be shared by both parties. That's something that I would hate to kind of. I know we can require it, but I like to hear what other commissioners think, whether we should require it or simply leave it at Patrick's suggestion at the pre-con meeting.
And sorry to interject. Sorry to interject. I want to clarify what I had said before. I was suggesting a pre-con meeting for the construction activities, perhaps a temporary
for the
fencing.
construction.
And
Yes.
that if you all wanted to require a permanent fence, I would do that now, and we could incorporate that as part of the conditions of approval. But I was, just to clarify, I was recommending not requiring a permanent fence, but perhaps having a pre-con meeting to require a temporary fencing or any measures that would be
fence.
necessary
Is that
for
what you were
construction.
requiring? Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I would go along with that, but I'd like to hear what other commissioners think about this.
No, I agree with Patrick's idea of the primary issue with the fence and the safety is during the construction period, it seems, and not as a long-term issue. In which case, I think that it's perfectly reasonable to have the meeting for construction and determine what's necessary, and then in the long term, the Montessori school can do what it feels is necessary for its own safety long term. But it's just going to be residential use, so I think that a meeting on that and what temporary screening and safety measures are needed during construction is fine and acceptable.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, does someone want to make a motion to that regard? It would be a condition on the approval of the Larson property administrative subdivision plan, and we can take a vote and see where we are.
John, did you have something else?
Do you want to see? Do you want to have more discussion, Commissioner Bartley?
I do want more discussion.
Okay.
I have an issue with regards to a potential burden that the Montessori school may have to endure because of the construction. And that this obligation and responsibility of the Montessori school is no fault of their own. And I find it striking that someone would characterize a non-conforming use to create an obligation as their proactive endeavors. And so, I don't know if I want to participate in the motion or not on this. I don't know if we can table this for a future date, but if that's a possibility, I'd like to table it. Thanks.
I'd like to. I mean, for the plan right now, if that's the sticking point, I'd like to go. I think we should go ahead and move on it. And if staff or the current chair can give me do we need to make a motion to include a pre-con meeting as a condition of approval, an additional addition?
Okay. Sure, go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
Make a motion.
So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve, to approve the Larson property administrative subdivision with the conditions currently included, as well as an additional condition to schedule a pre-con meeting to discuss necessary safety measures, including screening and fencing.
Okay.
In the construction process.
All right. I hear there's a motion on the floor. I'd like to second it. So why don't we take a vote? All those in favor say aye. Or raise your hand.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Pinero, Robert Cronenberg.
Yeah.
I need to just clarify. So a pre-construction meeting, also called pre-con, that's required for every development.
Yeah.
And so I think in this case, what we would probably need to say is that during the pre-construction meeting, a discussion about safety fencing needs to occur, because that's typically not something that's done. And I don't know, we can add that to a condition. But just I wanted to let this board know that every single application that is going to be disturbing land in the county requires a pre-construction meeting.
I think the important thing is to raise the issue of the concern that the board has with regards to the protection of the children and a temporary fence.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was asking, is what was the exact condition we're including, which is that pre-construction meeting included a discussion of safety measures and fencing along the property edge, if we can put a condition in like that.
Okay, so we're putting a condition. There's a motion on the floor. I will second that motion. So why don't we take a vote? All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Bartley, are you abstaining or are you voting against it?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so we have 2 in favor and 1 abstain. So the motion does pass. Thank you very much. Yes, good morning. We're still in the morning of March 16, 2023, and this is the planning board meeting, and we're gonna discuss one issue, item number 6, which is the State Safe Streets Act of 2023 briefing, and this is with regards to Bill 1123 and transmitting. There's a staff recommendation and transmitting comments to the county council. And I'm gonna ask the staff to give us that briefing and what they're recommending.
Great. Thank you very much, Vice Chair Pinheiro. My name, for the record, is Jason Sartori. I'm Chief of the Countywide Planning and Policy Division at the Planning Department. And I'm just going to give a real quick intro for the benefit, especially of our two new commissioners who are here. On occasion, we'll bring things to the board for the board's review and comments to pass along to the county council, bills that are before the county council that don't necessarily require our participation or our comments, but if they're relevant to our work program and the things that we focus on in the planning department and that the planning board is concerned with, we'll bring them to you and brief you on them and give you that opportunity to transmit comments. And the council does take those into consideration. And so we are trying, in this case, to bring before you comment. We would like to get comments to the county council before they have a public hearing on Bill 1123 next Tuesday. And so the other thing I want to highlight about this, when we requested that the board accept the working draft of the pedestrian master plan as the public hearing draft, and we have our public hearing scheduled for next Thursday evening on the pedestrian master plan. One of the things I mentioned was that there were already aspects of our pedestrian master plan recommendations that council members were already pursuing in terms of legislation, and that is what we have before you today. So it's kind of fortuitous that we see the work that our Mr. Glazer and the pedestrian master plan team have been doing for the past several years is starting to, really gain traction and actually with this bill that we have before you today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Glazer and he'll run through the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Sartori. For the record, members of the planning board, my name is Eli Glazer, and I'm happy to speak with you today and meet you, some of you for the first time, as the project manager for the county's pedestrian master plan. I'm happy to brief you on Bill 11-23, which, as Mr. Sartori said, will soon be in front of the county council. This should be a fairly quick briefing. The agenda is just a description of the bill, staff's comments on opportunities to make this legislation even better, and then a discussion among board members, and ultimately the determination about whether or not we should be transmitting comments to county council. So basic information about the bill. This was introduced at the end of February by Council President Evan Glass with 5 co-sponsors. It amends Section 31-9A of the County Code and adds Section 31-9C and -9D. The goal of this bill is to advance the county's Vision Zero goals by eliminating serious and fatal crashes, by prioritizing student safety in school zones, providing more access for pedestrians in a crosswalk, prohibiting right turn on red, and requiring a plan for increased automated traffic enforcement. As Mr. Sartori said, the public hearing for this bill will be held on March 21st, this coming Tuesday, and a work session of the Transportation and Environment Committee is scheduled to take up this legislation on March 30th of this year. This bill would improve pedestrian safety by doing 4 things. 1, requiring an infrastructure review of pedestrian-related collisions in school zones, prohibiting drivers of motor vehicles from making right turns on a red light at certain intersections, requiring certain traffic control devices at crosswalks in the county's downtowns and town centers, and then lastly, requiring the county executive to produce an automated traffic enforcement plan. So I'm going to go through each of those briefly and then dive into some of our comments. The school zone traffic infrastructure review. This part of the legislation says that the Montgomery County Department of Transportation must coordinate with Montgomery County Public Schools to review each traffic collision that is on a county road, involves a student, and occurs within a school zone or on school property during arrival and dismissal. The goal of the review is really to identify engineering deficiencies or other challenges that led to the collision and the identification of appropriate mitigation and countermeasures to make sure that a similar collision does not happen again in the future. The legislation says the review must be completed within 6 months of any injury or fatality, and the review must be shared publicly. So that's the first part. Second part, the legislation says that the Department of Transportation must install signage indicating no turn on red at the intersection of every county road within our downtowns and town centers. Those specific downtowns and town centers are identified in attachment B in your packet, the packet of maps, and that comes from the County Code section 49-31. The third piece of this is leading pedestrian intervals. And for those who may not know, a leading pedestrian interval essentially is a time in the traffic signal phase where pedestrians have the walk sign and the red signal is still given for vehicles, as you can see in the photo here. Essentially, a leading pedestrian interval gives pedestrians a head start of 3 to 7 seconds before motor vehicles are given a green, which allows pedestrians to get into the crosswalk before turning vehicles can enter it, which really improves yielding to motor vehicle yielding to pedestrians and reduces conflicts. So this legislation requires MCDOT to provide leading pedestrian intervals at every crosswalk along county roads within the downtowns and town centers, the same downtowns and town centers that are identified in section 49-31 and attachment B in your packet. And then the last piece of this is the automated enforcement action plan. This legislation would require the county executive to transmit a plan to county council to increase the number of automated enforcement cameras for traffic light enforcement, speeding, and stop sign compliance. The plan should identify the number and type of cameras, how much funding would be required to procure and maintain the cameras, and then the timeline for their deployment. The idea with this legislation is that once this is initially published, I believe it's supposed to be initially published within 180 days of this bill becoming law. The plan would then be resubmitted annually as circumstances change and automated enforcement cameras are installed. So at this point, those are the 4 different elements of the legislation. I guess if there are any specific comments about the legislation itself, I could take those now. But if not, we can definitely jump into some of the staff comments about opportunities to improve the legislation.
Yeah. Go, Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks for your presentation and thanks for clarifying the law. It's a much needed law. I've worked and lived in downtown Silver Spring. My office has been downtown Silver Spring, and some of the improvements here are awesome. Especially the delay in traffic lights at the intersection of Cameron and Georgia Avenue and Spring and Georgia Avenue, allowing pedestrians to get into the crosswalk before the light change is awesome idea. I have 2 concerns. One is there a component of this law that calls for public service announcement and or communications with regards to pedestrians engaging in safe habits? And are those communications going to be in English and Spanish? I think it's really important that we also, not only with driver behavior compliance and modification, but we also need citizen pedestrian behavior communication and modification to keep the pedestrians safe and that they understand the laws and when to walk and when not to walk. And there may need to be some public announcements with regards to, the responsibility of pedestrian to use the crosswalk and the times to use the crosswalk. Also, but then another concern I have is the automated enforcement and installation of cameras. I find this curious because if pedestrians break the law and enter a crosswalk or intersection, I don't think there's going to be any automated enforcement with regards to the pedestrian entering a crosswalk illegally or crossing the street illegally, that more often than not contributes to them being injured. And so I'm curious as to how automated enforcement is going to work with regards to pedestrians and modifying their behavior. We know how it works for people operating vehicles. You take a picture of their license plate and then you send them a ticket. But sometimes there are exceptions. I'm concerned about the installation of cameras and whether or not they would be used for more than enforcement of penalizing drivers and their bad behavior. The specter of government is always a concern to me, and sometimes it's used for more than enforcement of traffic laws. Will it be used for revenue generation, or will it be used to protect the pedestrians? Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bartley. We'll have, well, if you can respond to his concern, either Mr. Glazer or Mr. Sartoris. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, this is Eli Glacier for the record. The specific legislation does not have any elements or components that relate to pedestrian education, driver education, etc. I think the most relevant piece of the legislation to your concern is if the legislation were to be enacted, all of the locations that would have where no turn on red would be allowed, or sorry, you would not be able to make a right turn on red. There would be signage added at all of those locations to announce that that would be the case. But that's, again, largely for the people driving motor vehicles, not for pedestrians. So I think that's, I think there are other, I think the council in the past has used other strategies to address the pedestrian safety education piece of this. And then in the next several weeks, this board will have the opportunity to review in detail the pedestrian master plan that we've been working on, which has several key actions that relate to pedestrian safety and pedestrian education as well. So I think that's not something that's in this legislation, but I think there are opportunities to improve that for the county in sort of the months and years to come. So good question.
Because I travel like a couple of the main corridors where a lot of pedestrian fatalities and injuries have occurred, and there's been pedestrian fences put up to prevent pedestrians from crossing thoroughfares rather than using the crosswalk. And I think there needs to be signs, and there has to, in order for it to be effective, there has to be communication for pedestrians and the drivers, because we're sharing this space and we both have a mutual responsibility and obligation for one another's safety. In law, there's something called contributory negligence, right? If you're on a crosswalk when you're not supposed to be there and get hit by a vehicle, it's not the driver's fault, it's the pedestrian's fault, right? And so we need to be cognizant that we need good communications for people to understand. And one of the high incident areas are areas where they have a high transitory, maybe non-English speaking area. And I think sometimes there's a cultural difference and a misunderstanding on how, when you're supposed to cross the road. So we definitely need some communication piece with regards to educating, pedestrians and keeping them safe. Just implementing things to, prohibit drivers from hitting them. Okay, that's awesome. And I know it works, but we also have to make sure that we're educating our pedestrians to keep them safe.
Well, if I could recommend with regard to this at this point, I know that Mr. Glazer does have some recommended modifications to what's in the bill. We can talk a little bit more through this, but then I think maybe we can send a comment to the council that we encourage them to consider many of the other things that will be coming out of the pedestrian master plan, because that is, a pretty thorough and pretty extensive effort that will tackle a lot of these other issues too. And hopefully, whereas Council President Glass wanted to create a bill that address these particular four items, there are a lot of other things in the pedestrian master plan that can be implemented over the course of the next, several decades. So hopefully sooner than that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the staff comments for the improvement of the bill as well. My concern with pedestrian education is that the return on investment is fairly low compared to things that address cars, which are actually causing the deaths and injuries to the pedestrians, either in the crosswalks or not. So if we can go ahead and hear from the staff, and then maybe we can a little more discussion.
Yes, staff, go ahead with the recommendations. I just before you do that, I'd like to say that I share the concerns that Commissioner Bartley has with regards to both. It's a shared responsibility of the driver and the pedestrian, but that's not something treated in this bill. It is something of the pedestrian master plan, and we'll have opportunity to address that issue later on. Thank you very much. Go ahead with the recommendations.
Yes, thank you. So I think the first recommendation here is that essentially the legislation as written is very, very prescriptive about what the Department of Transportation should do at all of these locations. And I think, frankly, there are situations that may occur where implementing no turn on red and leading pedestrian intervals may not be the best approach from a public safety perspective. The staff comment is that we should be providing MCDOT flexibility to implement this. So MCDOT should have discretion to make other intersection changes that should improve traffic safety that may not be no turn on red and leading pedestrian intervals. But at the same time, I think one element that this bill does really well is especially it's like pulling from the infrastructure review piece, is that there should be like transparency about the process. So the staff comment would be to provide DOT this flexibility, but then at the same time, for locations where they find that no turn on red and leading pedestrian intervals are not appropriate, a rationale for why they're not appropriate should be publicly shared. So that's the first comment.
Okay.
The second comment, I think it's important that we clarify that the no turn on red and leading pedestrian interval provisions of the legislation apply only to county controlled signalized intersections. So as written, the bill references in two places the intersection of a county road for the no turn on red piece, and then at every crosswalk of a county road for the leading pedestrian interval piece. However, no turn on red and leading pedestrian intervals are only applicable to signalized intersections. Like you can't have a no turn on red at a stop sign, for instance, because everyone's stopping. And then at the same time, the county government does not control the intersections where county roads intersect state highways. Those are state controlled intersections. So this is more of a clarification that we should be more specific in the language. The council should be more specific about the scope of the legislation. A quick desktop review in our office found that about 40% of the signalized intersections in downtowns and town centers are county controlled, and then the remainder are state controlled. Third comment, that the legislation about the leading pedestrian intervals should actually be expanded beyond the downtowns and town centers to include what we would call major pedestrian generators outside of those places. So areas like the immediate vicinity around schools, parks, and community centers. These locations were highlighted as leading pedestrian interval opportunities in the pedestrian master plan, specifically key action P-2C. And the rationale here is that these areas they're small nodes of pedestrian activity, even though they're outside of these more major pedestrian activity zones, downtowns and town centers. So there's more detail in the staff report specifically about what this could include. And at the end of this presentation, there's some proposed language for the text of the legislation that gets into this a little bit further. And then the last piece here, with about 60% of the signalized intersections in the downtowns and town centers being state controlled, tackling those intersections, which for commissioners familiar with Silver Spring or Wheaton, are the main intersections in these areas. So Colesville at Georgia, Spring at Georgia, most of the major intersections in the Wheaton Triangle, convening a working group to advance implementation of similar approaches at the state-controlled intersections is really important. So this is just, I think, a comment worth communicating that the Department of Transportation, and Montgomery County Department of Transportation should coordinate with the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration to explore opportunities to implement these treatments more broadly at the state-controlled intersections. Yeah, go for it.
I was just saying on that. I just want to say when you look at the pedestrian master plan, you'll see that our recommendations related to no turn on red restrictions and lead in pedestrian intervals talk about the need to engage both MCDOT at the county level, but also the State Highway Administration. And so this is kind of bringing that to play here. And going back to the second second comment that we showed here, this is really not just about clarifying, but also setting expectations. When, people see that if this bill gets adopted, they may think that every single one of these intersections, not recognizing that 60% of the intersections in our downtowns and town centers are not county controlled. And so the county law can't, determine that these changes apply there. So I'll go back to you.
Thanks. And then the last slide I have really is we've taken the opportunity to rewrite or to make changes to the legislation to basically implement the recommendations, the staff comments, to provide that guidance for council staff if they were interested in amending the legislation in this way. So the only other slide I have is that the staff recommendation here would be to transmit our comments as amended by the planning board regarding this bill to county council in advance of the public hearing on Tuesday. So happy to,
all right.
Yeah, anything you all want to discuss.
Okay, thank you very much. I agree with your 4 points. The first one has to do with flexibility. The second one is it's common sense that maybe the county thinks they have jurisdiction over all roads, but not over state roads. And the third one has to do with schools and other, parks and community centers. And the working group it's a good idea too. So let me, I think Commissioner Hedrick has a question or a point. Go ahead, Commissioner Hedrick.
Yeah, just a couple of, excuse me one second.
Go ahead.
A couple of things for clarification, and then some questions and maybe some recommendations for transmitting to the council. For the school zone, I think it was slide 5 is what I have in my notes. For the school zone, would a collision there require that gets investigated, reviewed, require all 3 of those things: a county road, a student, and in a school zone or property, or is it any of all 3 of those within the school zone? Is it an and or an or?
Yeah, I believe the last bullet here is an or. It's in a school zone or on school property. But yes, it would need to be on a county road and involving a student. So it's not. I think you could probably make the argument that if anyone was hit in a school zone, it could have been the circumstances that led to that crash could have affected a student, or in the future could affect a student. So it may make sense to do it in that case too. That's not what the legislation.
That's not what the legislation says right now. Yeah, I wanted to clarify on that. I would recommend, or I would like to propose that we request that just in a school zone or on a school zone or property. Quite honestly, like at least for an elementary schools, or at least in my experience, students aren't the only ones walking over there. So are parents, so are teachers, so are staff, so is everybody like that. I think that it would be, I don't know how much of it is out of our purview, but I would say that occurs within a school zone or on school property is probably enough for that piece, and that it basically expand or broaden that. That's my that's something I would like us to encourage them to do. Because it's quite possible that you've got many more than just students there at the time that could get involved in a collision.
Right. I think this is a good comment to send along. I'm just curious, are you also recommending then to remove the county road requirements so that it's even if it's on a...
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. My personal preference would be to remove the in a county road. I don't know if that's a legal issue or if that's something that I mean, I assume they can encourage MCDOT to investigate no matter what. But I would also recommend removing on a county road, because there are state roads that go by schools I know around me, and I'm sure across the county. So that would be my recommendation. But tell me if the legal issues are there or not.
This is an inference, I guess, an assumption based on how I'm not gonna. This is a little bit of speculation, but I think the county road piece of this is written in such a way that MCDOT is involved, the public schools are involved, and I think the ultimate outcome, the ultimate goal of this review process is to actually mitigate future crashes of this nature that happen at that location. And I think if the legislation is expanded to the state roads, it's going to make it more difficult to actually, you might get the review, but you may not get the follow-up to the review. Yeah. So I think this is written in a pragmatic way to sort of understand the scope of what's possible.
And where the county has the most impact or
exactly
potential.
Yeah.
If that's the case, and you think that there's more like, my concern is not necessarily the review but the follow-up. That's my issue. And if you think that that's the best way to go, involves the student, not students obviously would be the largest portion of the people, but there's plenty others, and I would recommend that we broaden that as much as possible, or at least encourage the county to broaden that as much as possible and as practical. If the county road issue is a thing, I'm fine with either recommending not mentioning that part, but I think as expansive as possible in this regard, to allow for the county the ability to put in what steps are necessary to improve safety around the schools, whether or not it involves a student or a parent or a teacher or staff or something like that. I had one or two other things. Do you mind if I go through them real quick?
Go ahead, please.
I don't want to step on anybody else's toes.
No,
if somebody else wants to jump in at the moment. With the no right turn on red, can we go back to that? I think it was a recommendation in the was number 2, I think.
Sorry, which slide?
Yeah, here, clarify on the county. Yeah. So this is good. I think it may be in the next one. I like no turn on red to be as expansive as possible. I completely understand the issue of state signaling and everything. But as you mentioned with the leading pedestrian intervals, there are plenty of pedestrian like heavy places that are not inside what would be considered a downtown or a town center area. So I would like us to sort of be as expansive on that as possible, recognizing that we don't, they don't have over everything. With the flexibility to MCDOT, my preference would be that not only does it have to be a public, but some sort of, if they're not going to put something there, that there has to be someone else, there's some sort of oversight on that if they're not going to put in a no right turn on red. From the staff's point of view, what sort of situations would you put a no right turn on red that would indicate it was a safer situation? There it is, 1-1. That was one.
Yeah.
But what situations where no right turn on red would improve the safety for pedestrians within the area?
It's a good question. I think there are opportunities potentially. So leading pedestrian intervals are one signalization tool to better separate vehicles and pedestrians. There's also other treatments. There's what are called leading through intervals, where essentially the through vehicles and through pedestrians get the signal at the same time, but you can't turn right or left across it. Or there's lagging pedestrian intervals, where pedestrians essentially can go longer. They can continue crossing after the light is red. So I think there are other.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
So yeah, I just think there are other signalization options and potential treatments that could be considered. And I think what we articulated in the pedestrian plan recommendation in regards to this is very similar to what I think the staff comment is that we're trying to transmit, which is that no turn on red and leading pedestrian, no turn on red should be the default. Like when you're thinking about designing an intersection, like that should be your starting point. And then if there are circumstances or factors that make that a net negative from like a traffic safety perspective, from a Vision Zero perspective, then you should document the reasons that you believe that to be the case and what other treatments you're pursuing. But I think it's very important that as planners, we defer to the extent possible to our counterparts in DOT while articulating like what the performance measure, what the standard should be. So the default is still making this sort of thing the standard that you can vary from with a rationale is a massive improvement from what exists today.
From what is currently, which is defaultive.
Yeah. So that's sort of where we were coming from in the plan, and that's the essence essentially of the comment that that staff is interested in communicating.
Okay, no, and I just want to clarify that a bit, because that's kind of where I'm going with that. Is I would prefer the default, I prefer that we transmit that we prefer the default be no right turn on red, and other signaling options as necessary, or something along. You guys know that better than I. But because I don't want the default to maintain, I would prefer the default not maintain as no change, or I think that's exactly sort of the thing I'm trying to get to, is that the default be no right turn on red. Other signaling options are the next default if it's a better for safety and pedestrian safety in particular, and then that we're allowing a right turn on red at any. I find it hard to think that there is a safety issue with allowing right turn on red at any place that's a town center or downtown area. But yeah, whatever we can do to sort of strengthen my preference would be that we strengthen the comment to definitely the default should be no right turn on red and leading pedestrian intervals. Those should be the default. Other signaling options, and then maintenance of the status quo is the buried in the floor kind of option. Having had several issues nearby where I live myself. Does that make sense? Am I not being totally confusing with what I'm saying?
I think staff understands what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I totally agree with Commissioner Hedrick. The question is, does that require rewording some of your recommendations, or is that something that you can address? You said that you're going to have a meeting on the pedestrian master plan next Thursday. Is that something that can be raised at that point, or you actually need to do a rewording of your comments, or just express a concern? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what we have next Thursday is the public hearing before the planning board on the pedestrian master plan. And we won't be addressing anything there. That'll just be an opportunity for you to hear from the community. But with regard to these comments, I think the point that Commissioner Hedrick was making is captured in the language that we have of saying we think that we should post the no turn on red signage, and in any situation where it's not appropriate, MCDOT needs to provide the rationale for that. However, in our transmittal letter, we can kind of make that very clear and use the language that we have in the pedestrian master plan, where we say we believe that the planning board believes that no turn on red should be the default at these intersections.
Yes.
Okay. I would like the strong as strong a language as we can there. That's my preference, because I flexibility is good, particularly with implementation administration, but I want to make sure that we're moving toward the pedestrian safety with no right turn on red and things like that, as opposed to sort of flexibility with the status quo and things like that. That's just my preference. And I think Tanya, did you have something to say a minute ago? I'm sorry if I talked over there.
Yes, I just wanted to make an additional suggestion. Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director. With regards to this matter, I think, Eli, it will be helpful to include in the transmittal letter of the board's comments some additional explanation that you provided in terms of what those other options may be that may be appropriate for MCDOT to apply, just to provide some additional clarity when it gets to the council, because otherwise we just note that there may be instances where some other safety measures may be appropriate, but we don't explain what those are. And so I think that would just be helpful clarification for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had just one other thing, and then I'll stop.
Yeah, go ahead.
Stop monologuing here. I really liked number 3 on the expanding the pedestrian. I think that's number 3 on the. I didn't write down, I think 11. Yeah, and like I think I mentioned earlier, there are pedestrian heavy places that don't necessarily occupy downtowns and town centers, and I would really like us to hit that point. You know, be it schools, parks, community centers. I know the extent. You know, there's major intersections where there are pedestrians that are outside of those, so I would like us to hit that hard. And I don't know if we have a definition of that or some sort of measurement status or something to determine high pedestrian activity outside of those areas. But I would like us to make sure that we encourage that and encourage the same sort of adoption of no right on red, leading pedestrian intervals, etc., at those places where there's heavy pedestrian activity.
Yeah, I guess 2 points on there just very quickly. The first is that the downtowns and town centers identified in the maps in attachment B are kind of just like what exists today. As part of the pedestrian master plan, we are, I guess, Mr. Ansbacher, how would you define it? We are further defining additional downtowns and town centers that this legislation would ultimately apply to those areas as well if it were to pass.
Yeah,
so,
that was sort of what I was asking is, do we have a definition of high pedestrian activity areas that are not downtowns and town centers that this would apply to? Or is this a suggestion that once those places are identified, we implement similar things? Does that make sense? Sorry.
So we have a current definition of downtowns and town centers, which are the maps that you have. Through this plan, are expanding the number of those places to places that have that pedestrian activity and potential future pedestrian activity that you're talking about. And then this legislation, the draft legislation, our comment to improve the legislation to these schools, parks, and community centers, we have some draft text that essentially would say we should consider this at intersections within 1 block of a school, park, or community center frontage. So we're sort of defining the immediate boundary of those areas, that it's not all of the intersections within a quarter mile of these areas, but it's the immediate vicinity. And that's one way we could define it. I think it could be obviously defined in many other ways as well.
Sort of wrapping it into what we're currently defining as downtowns and town centers, not necessarily I think I get it. Yeah. That's just, again, and my preference would be that our communication on that be as strongly word that as strongly and expansively as possible, because we've had plenty, at least I always use my neighborhood as an example of places where we're not, in a downtown or town center, but we've had pedestrians and cyclists both killed at intersections there, and I want that definition to be as expansive or encourage the council to make that definition as expansive as possible.
This is David Ansbacher. I think this is a great discussion. I think it would be as helpful to the council as possible to be specific in the changes that we want. One change that we could make here is to specify, within 1 block of a school, park, community center, or perhaps a transit station. As well, to be a little bit more expansive.
I think that would cover sort of what I would prefer that we transmit. My definition is not that we just say be expansive, but I do want to be as detailed with that as possible. If we think the best way is to go, radius around particular points like school, like you said, schools, community centers, transit. If that's the best way to do it and the most specific that'll sort of have the best chance of sneaking into legislation, I'd be very much in support of that. So yeah, that's fine. I didn't know if we had a defined definition of what is a high pedestrian area that's not a downtown or town center, but like if that's the definition, I'm perfectly fine with that. Thanks. And like I said, I think that's the last of mine. I'll quit monologuing at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hedrick. Are you getting the gist of it, the staff, in terms of any changes that need to be done? Or maybe in the letter, make it more, emphatic about the default and also the issues that have to do with the third point there, schools and community centers. Okay.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if there are no other comments or suggestions from the planning board, I think we're prepared to sort of assimilate everything that was shared today if the board is comfortable with it, and building on the comments that were in the staff report to put together a transmittal letter. I see Commissioner Bartley has his hand.
I think it's a great piece of legislation, and as the population density increases, they're being proactive to address it, and so that needs to be said. That's good legislation.
Great. Yeah, I think we definitely want to convey that it's great, and these are the things that we think can make it even better. So I think that will come through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my intention was not to indicate that I think the legislation is not good enough, but like, I mostly pro-expansive. But thanks a lot, y'all, for bringing this up. This is really good, and I appreciate it.
Okay, do we need a motion for the comments to be sent to the county council, or with us agreeing on it, it's enough? We need a motion?
I think if you just, if you would just
okay.
have I think the motion is on some language to the effect of what's on the screen.
Okay. All right. Can I hear a motion? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make if it's right.
Commissioner.
I'll make a motion to transmit the staff comments as amended and reflecting our discussion here regarding the pedestrian bill 11-23 to the county council.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, let's take a vote then. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. So go ahead. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And I think with that, we're going to adjourn then.